Hey there. Okay, think about this for a second. The chair you're sitting on, it used to be a tree. Your water bottle? It was probably just a pile of little plastic pellets. Ever stop and wonder, how in the world does that happen? Well, that's exactly what we're going to dive into today. That incredible journey from raw stuff to real, everyday things.
I mean, seriously? Have you ever just sat down, maybe you're at your kitchen table, and you just look at a perfectly normal chair?
And just thought to yourself, how was this actually made? Like, what are the steps? How does it go from being, part of a tree to this thing I'm sitting on? Well, let's break it all down.
And believe me, that journey is, well, it's a lot. Just look at the difference here. You start with something as basic as a stack of wood, and you end up with that. It's a huge transformation. And that's exactly what we're going to unpack today, starting right at the beginning with the very first decision any maker has to make.
So step one, every single thing that's ever been made starts its life right here, with one simple choice. Before you can even think about cutting or shaping or sticking anything together, you've got to pick your material. You've got to choose the right stuff for the job. And for the most part, materials fall into what you could call the big three. First, you've got your woods. Natural, super versatile. Think about a classic wooden dining table. Then you've got metals. We love them because they're strong, but you can also bend them into shape, right? Like the forks and knives next to your plate. And finally, of course, polymers, which is just a fancy word for plastics. They're lightweight, you can mold them into almost anything, and they come in every color imaginable. Your phone case is a perfect example.
Now, here's a really key point. A furniture maker doesn't just go out and chop down a tree, and a metal worker doesn't start with a big rock of iron ore. No way! They buy their materials in what are called standardized stock forms. So things like planks, sheets, rods, even little plastic granules. It just makes the whole manufacturing process way more efficient from the get-go.
Okay, so you've picked your material, you've got it in a nice, neat stock form. What's next? Well, now the fun begins. You've got to start giving it a specific shape. And this is where we get into all the cutting, bending, and sizing.
When it comes to actually shaping stuff, you can pretty much put all the tools into two big buckets. On one side, you have hand tools. These are powered by, your own muscle. They're fantastic for really detailed, precise, small-scale work. And on the other side, machine tools. These are the ones powered by electricity, and they bring the serious speed, power, and repeatable accuracy you need for making tons of something.
And the difference between the two is just night and day. I mean, think about a simple handsaw. It's great, it's reliable, it's precise, but it's slow. Now compare that to a big old bandsaw. That thing has a powered blade that just rips through material with incredible speed and force. It's a massive leap in what you can do.
But hey, shaping isn't always about cutting stuff away. There are other cool ways to do it. Take vacuum forming, for example. You've seen the results of this a million times. It's how they make things like food trays or that clear plastic packaging that's impossible to open. You just heat up a sheet of plastic until it gets all soft and floppy, you drape it over a mold, and then whoosh, a vacuum sucks all the air out, pulling the plastic tight against the mold. Let it cool for a second, and boom, it's a solid, rigid shape.
And then, of course, you have the total game changer, 3D printing. Now, the big idea to grasp here is that it's an additive process. Think about it. Most manufacturing is subtractive. You start with a block of wood, and you saw and drill away the parts you don't want. 3D printing does the complete opposite. It adds material, building an object up from nothing, one super thin layer at a time, all from a digital design on a computer. All right, so we've got a bunch of perfectly shaped pieces. Awesome. But most things aren't just one single piece, right? A chair has legs, a seat, a back. So the next critical step is putting it all together. This is the art of joining.
And just like with tools, joining methods kind of fall into two main camps. You've got your temporary joins, think screws, nuts, and bolts. These are for things you might want to take apart later. Then you have the permanent joins. This is the no-going-back category, things like superglue, welding, or rivets. The goal here is to make two pieces become one, forever.
Oh, and I absolutely guarantee you have struggled with one of these before. This little guy is a cam lock. It's a type of knockdown or KD fitting, and it is basically the heart and soul of every piece of flat pack furniture ever made. It's a really clever little gadget that lets you create a surprisingly strong joint with just a quick turn of a screwdriver.
But what about a situation where you can only get to one side of the thing you're joining? You can't put a nut on a bolt you can't reach, right? That's where the genius of the pop rivet comes in. You stick it in the hole, and a special tool grabs that little pin in the middle and pulls. As it pulls, it squashes the back end of the rivet, creating a permanent head on the blind side, the side you can't even see or touch. It's such a clever solution.
Now, if you want the absolute strongest, most permanent bond you can get with metal, you're talking about welding. You use incredibly high heat to literally melt the edges of two pieces of metal. They actually flow together, become liquid for a moment, and then cool down as one single super strong piece. It's basically fusing metal.
Okay, let's recap. We've picked our material, we've cut it and shaped it, and we've joined all the pieces together. We have a thing. It's an object, but we're not quite finished. There's one last, super important step, the finishing touch.
And listen, a good finish is all about good prep work. You can't just slap a coat of paint on some rough, dusty wood and expect it to look good. It won't. First, you have to make sure the surface is totally dry and smooth. Then you sand it, always with the grain so you don't leave ugly scratches. And finally, you have to get rid of all the dust before you even think about painting. Get that right, and your finish will stick perfectly and look amazing.
And that finish is doing two crucial jobs at once. Job number one is protection. It's what stops wood from rotting, what keeps metal from rusting, and what protects plastic from getting faded and brittle in the sun. Job number two, of course, is just making it look good. The finish adds the color, the gloss, the final polish that makes a product look, well, finished.
And if you want to see just how intense this protection process can get, check out something called tantalizing. This is the heavy-duty treatment they give to wood that's going to live outside, like for fences or playground equipment. They stick the lumber inside a giant tank, and a powerful vacuum sucks all the air out from inside the wood itself. Then, they flood the tank with a chemical preservative and use high pressure to force that liquid deep, deep into the timber. The result is wood that can stand up to rain and weather for years and years.
So after all that, you might be feeling a little unhinged. Sorry, couldn't resist the pun. But seriously, it's these little details, even something as simple as a hinge, that tell the whole story of how something is made.
So here's a little challenge for you. Right now, just take a quick look around the room you're in. Look at the hinges on the door, the screws holding your desk together, the finish on the table, the plastic on your TV remote. You now know a little piece of the story behind every single one of those things. And trust me, once you start looking for it, you start seeing this stuff absolutely everywhere. Thanks so much for tuning in.